Welcome back on the AM show. Before we kickstart, we all know that water is life, and what you put inside you, about 61% of your body, if you're a man, is formed of water. If you're a woman, slightly less. That is why you need to nourish yourself throughout the day with premium water. And I'd like to introduce you to Awake Purified Drinking Water. It's processed through a strict purification process to ensure that every bottle on the market refreshes you better. And guess what? They have sizes perfect for everybody. For the kids, 330 milliliters, and they're good to go. You can send them off to school. For adults, 500 milliliters, 750 milliliters, 1.5 liters for the heavy drinkers. And if you're thinking of something suitable for your dispenser at your office or your home, they have something that will fit that as well. 19 milliliter jars for 19 liter jar bottles for that specific purpose. So all you need to do now is stay awake with Awake Purified Drinking Water wherever you go. Now here's the heartwarming part for me. Awake Purified Drinking Water, for every bottle you purchase, an amount is donated to the kitty of the National Cardiothoracic Center. We all know how costly it is to get help in terms of cardio issues that arise. Well, each time you make a purchase, they put something in the kitty of the National Cardiothoracic Center, and that is indeed heartwarming. It's another quality product of Casapreco Company Limited. Do remember, if you'd like to purchase in bulk, the number to call 0262 351 251. This advert is FDA approved. But at this juncture, Ghana for, we contemplate the way forward for Ghana on the economic front. Nkrumah once said, we face neither east nor west, we face forward. Unfortunately, at this point in time, we cannot say same for our economy. We may wail about COVID-19, we may lament the Russo-Ukrainian war, but how about what damage we have caused ourselves in country on our own? Our debt stands at a staggering 569.3 billion Ghana cedis. We didn't get there by mistake. Yet what do we have to show? We would have expected today, and I'm a bit upset about this, because today we would have expected to hear from Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. You can see him in the background, delivering the mid-year budget review, trying to see whether there would be some relief for the ordinary Ghanaian man. Now, there's been a lot of shifting, moving. We'll do it today. We'll do it 2 days after. We'll do it today. Now we're getting it next Monday. But what? Those guests joining us this morning, what are their expectations? What should the finance minister be doing to cushion ordinary Ghanaians between now and the end of the year? Well, for that conversation, we're joined by Dr. Eric Boateng Yadom. He's a senior lecturer, Faculty of Accounting and Finance at the UPSA. We also have Dr. Michael Ayamga. He's an economist at the UDS. And Eric Amponsa Boateng, an economist and tax consultant. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
All right. Did I hear everyone? I think I heard two people. Did I hear Eric Boateng?
Good morning. Good morning.
All right.
Good morning.
Okay. So let's do this. I'll start with you, Dr. Boateng Yadom. For you, what has our economy shaped up to become as of this point in time on the back of the $600 million we've received so far from the IMF, the 300 million, I should say, and what we're expecting at the end of the year? What has been the impact, I should say, on the economy from where you sit? If I asked you to give an appraisal of the economy now, that is basically what I'm asking all three of you for starters. What would you say? How far have we come? I'll start with you, Dr. Boateng Yadom.
Thank you, and good morning once again to your viewers and listeners. The 600 million received from IMF has contributed to about 4.2% growth in GDP, which is in general terms for the first quarter, I should say, of this year. In general terms, you will say we are doing well, but then you have to check the fundamentals of the growth we are receiving for the 4.2%. And you will see that service sector is contributing around 10.1%, and agri sector a little around 3%. And you see that the manufacturing sector is contracted within the same period. So what it means is that the funds received in a way has contributed, but the engine of growth, which is industry, is contracting. And why is it contracting? It's contracted based on several factors. Number one could be the taxes that government is levying on industry. And if you continue to tax industry in a certain way, you end up even eating up their capital, which means the funds available for investment. We shouldn't forget that industry has already suffered in terms of exchange rate losses. So piling more taxes to generate more revenue, which in a way government intends to achieve its medium-term budget of ensuring that its tax to GDP moves to around 18.3%. And on the other hand, in achieving the tax to GDP target, you shouldn't forget that those who are paying the taxes, which is mainly from industry, you are squeezing so much from them that will not make them sustainable going forward. So the IMF has helped, but the focus of the funding has not contributed to the sustainability of the industry. And in any way, we were expecting, if you look at agricultural growth over the period, you will see that agricultural growth is dwindling, it's reducing. We're expecting the dwindling agriculture to transition into industry. But in Ghana's case, it's not like that. The growth that moved from agricultural rather went to service. So it jumped. We didn't go through the normal transition of an emerging economy. The jumping from industry to service does not also show that the service sector is, in terms of providing the financial service and insurance and all that, it doesn't really also mean that they are doing well. It means that those in retailing, is where the funds is moving. So if we check the Ghana statistical data on the subsectors that contributed to the growth, you can see retailing and other parts are doing well. So the funds or the cushioning is pushing up importation of goods and services, which in a way will not augur well for the local economy. So we are expecting that the Minister of Finance will reposition in terms of investment to support industry, so that we'll be able to transition properly from agriculture to industry and to service. So I think this is what I'm expecting from the minister when the budget is read. And also, the funds that have been received from the fund has not gone into the direction we're expecting. We're expecting more to pushing industry to guarantee sustainability. These are my initial takes.
Dr. Boateng Adam, thank you for that initial take. Let me come to Dr. Ayamga now. Do you share in Dr. Boateng Adam's take as far as the economy is concerned? We've had the $600 million. That's the first tranche of the IMF money. We're expecting another $300 million come end of year. But when he talks about Ken Ofori-Atta re-strategizing when it comes to dealing with the economy, what is your take?
Yes, I tend to agree with him, especially when he's talking about the fact that agriculture has been declining, not growing. And that is a worrying trend, because that is the base of our economy. And I also agree with him largely that Ken Ofori-Atta has become largely predictable to the market and market players. And you expect that he would have probably displayed some, at least change in his approach to running the economy and to keep speculators guessing. But now you realize that people have understood that we are going to continuously struggle to meet our foreign exchange obligations. They know that we require almost 400 million to buy petroleum products and other things. So when we get money, all they do is take a calculator, do the numbers, and then they don't respond. So we have succeeded in creating an economy that has become largely resistant to economic stimulus. And we seem not to be able to nudge the economy in the right direction. So I agree that much as we think that Ken Ofori-Atta has the right to be finance minister and other things, I still feel that a change in that area would have at least given some confidence to investors. I generally don't think that we have succeeded in stabilizing the economy and we have turned around towards a more sustainable trajectory. All we have done is do like we have been doing in the past, that anytime there are inflows and there are receipts, we use them to subsidize dollars. That's what I call it, for people to hold. So that's largely the modus operandi, and that is the strategy the finance minister has adopted. And if you look at what we are seeing now, we are beginning to see even all the actors describing our economy as it ought to be. And I think somewhere last week, the World Bank finally made some of the right calls that it should have made in the early years and days of our crisis, that our economic challenges were anchored in domestic vulnerabilities, largely the mountain debt, the very rigid, what you call it, budgets, and the inflexible nature of government in terms of there is desire to cut down government expenditure and give us some fiscal space. You know, largely we have failed to generate revenue to at least even compensate for some of the huge fall that we are having. So our inability to generate these revenues, coupled with the continuous rising expenditure, is a huge, huge problem and sends a bad signal to market actors. And if you ask me, I would think that a change in at the finance ministry would at least introduce some uncertainty, introduce some degree of unpredictability, and allow market actors to at least change strategy. As it stands now, nobody actually takes us serious. And I did say the last time government passed those 3 tax bills, I indicated that they were not going to meet the revenue targets because the tax system will have a constricted effect on the economy. Now we are looking at domestic consumption declining significantly. We are looking at investor confidence almost at an all-time low. And we are looking at a situation where taxes are crippling business, high interest rates are crippling domestic investment. If you take all this into consideration and also look at the fact that even our own projections are way off, you cannot say that things are going well. I believe that the IMF deal is already beginning to fail arrival because upon receiving the 600 million, it followed the trend that we all expected. The city gained marginally, stabilized marginally, and is back to where it was, down, sliding down once again. If we get another tranche, that's basically what is going to happen. And I believe that government's failure to follow its own predictions and to implement policies that will allow it to cut down its increase revenue, protect the vulnerable sector of the economy, and also increase domestic production. These are the words of Ken Oforiatta. This is what he said he wanted to do. But if you look at what he has done exactly the opposite, and increasing taxes, and also allowing the utilities and cost of production to rise, which has further made many of our industries vulnerable. So largely, I think that I tend to agree with Dr. Yedon that the minister has not been that imposing and confidence-inspiring figure that would have provided some form of leadership to the markets. As it stands now, I think that our targets and trajectory for recovery is already beginning to fail.
Right. Let me now come to Mr. Amponsah Boateng. The 2 other panelists have had their say, and a thread I see running through, the bit about investor confidence, the bit about changing a strategy, and now, like we heard Dr. Ayamga just say, he's not cutting a confidence-inspiring figure. What is your take, Mr. Amponsah Boateng?
Thank you very much. Good morning once again, and good morning to your viewers and and listeners. Well, you realize that from the beginning of the year, we had to introduce, or the government had to introduce an additional 2.5%, okay, for the VAT. So it shot up from 12.5% to 15%. What has happened is that has led to an increase in revenue mobilization. And that is why the GRA was able to exceed its target for the first quarter. Okay, it's also because of the reason is that the depreciation of the cedi was also there, because you realize that the exchange rate, okay, let's look at the last quarter of 2022, the rates, and let's compare them with the first quarter of 2023. And so even though the import duties, okay, they haven't changed, but because of the depreciation of the cedi, you're now paying more. Now you ask yourself, last 2 or 3 years, if you were buying an item, let's say for 100 cedis, today, how much are you paying for it? We also have to look at the fact that the DDUP has actually led to people.
Hello, Mr.
People losing
Boateng.
revenue. And you will agree with me that when you have so much disposable income. Hello?
We lost you for about 30 seconds. Can you just go back and take it from there?
Oh, okay. Okay. Yes. The point I'm making is that if you are an individual and you normally save your money or invest your money, and then due to the debt exchange program, you lose that revenue, what happens is that consumption declines. And we know that what we invest, okay, is normally through the savings that we have that eventually leads to investment. And that is what makes the economy grow. The other issue is that when we got the first tranche of the IMF loan, you'll agree with me that temporarily we saw the cedi appreciating against the dollar. But for the past 2 weeks, you can see that the cedi is beginning to fall. And rightly so, because what we were expecting that money to be used for, what we have done is to just make sure that we introduce the dollar into the system, and that pushed the cedi to appreciate. Like my other friend also said, government has introduced 3 new bills. Okay, you look at the growth and sustainability levy. You look at the excise duty. You also look at the Income Tax Act. Okay, if you look at the changes that have been made, I think the individual or the employee is worse off. We have a situation whereby an employee who earns a chargeable income of more than 50,000 cedis in a month is going to pay 35% of it as PAYE. This same issue came up in 2018, if you agree with me, whereby from August 2018 till December 2018, we also had this happening, and we kicked against it. And that is the reason why from 1st of January, there was an amendment, and then we got back to the 30%. When you look at the corporate tax rate, it's still 25%. And for those on the stock exchange and probably those in the hospitality, they are on 22%. But individuals are paying more tax or taxes than the corporate bodies. The other issue is that industry is affected. The cost of doing business in Ghana has now increased, and it's because of the high import duties on items that we import to be able to produce the goods that we have. We also have the tariffs, electricity, water, and even transportation. So when you put all of that together, what it means is that those people in the manufacturing sector and even those doing businesses generally have a challenge. What it means is that your net profit is going to decrease. And so even though we were expecting that at the end of the day, we'll be able to exceed the revenue target, I'm afraid it will not happen. Another issue that you can mention is that in the past, when you have exchange losses, okay, they were deductible. Now, per the new law, they are saying that if the exchange losses have not been realized, then it means that they are not going to allow them as a deductible expense. And then we're also looking at the growth and sustainability levy. Fine, some of them, depending on which sector that you are in, some of them are paying 5% of their net profit before tax. Others are paying 2.5%. And what even surprises me is the fact that if you are making losses continuously for 5 years, you are being told that you are going to pay a percentage of your output, okay? And all of us know that we always have to match your output with what? The expenses or the expenditure that went into the generation of that income or that output. And so that is where industries are going to suffer the more. And so if you ask me, I think that we haven't done so well as an economy. You look at the rate of inflation, it is still very high. You also find that the policy rate, interest rates are also very high. Now, one issue that even if we do not handle it well, is going to be a problem to us is the treasury bills. I am just imagining or wondering how government will be able to pay, because I foresee a situation whereby government may not be able to pay. And if you are not fortunate, then we may probably have the haircut. So the advice is that if you're not too sure, I would rather say that move your funds from the T-bills and place them in fixed deposits. At least some of the banks are offering between 14 and 15%. And so at least with that one, you are sure that your money or your monies are safe. So on the whole, okay, I do not think that we've actually been on course. Just one more thing. You know, we were looking at a 3% growth rate by the end of the year 2023. The IMF reviewed it to 2.8, and now the IMF is even saying that we may end up having a growth rate of 1.6%, which means that we are way off the target that we set for ourselves.
Right. And so that obviously is a concern. Let me come to Dr. Ayamga briefly on this point, and maybe Dr. Eric Boakye Adam afterwards. I'll pose the same question to you. But starting with Dr. Ayamga, if you look at our tax revenue trajectory over the last 5 months, okay, you would realize that it stood at 5.6%, leaving us with a deficit of 1.8% compared to our expenditure, which stood at 7.4%. If you look at that, the fact that we're taxing ourselves so much, yet our expenditure is still some 1.8 percentage points ahead of what we hope to raise by way of revenue. That vis-a-vis whether we are getting taxed too much, whether some of the tax handles should be taken off. What are your expectations? I've spoken to people who have said that, look, take out the COVID-19 levy. In fact, the e-levy, Professor Boateng has said the e-levy should go. What is your take, Dr. Ayamga?
Yes, I have already indicated that the e-levy was an unnecessary introduction, and it's something that has dampened the electronic money transaction business in the country while not raking in the expected revenue. So it's an unnecessary evil. We ought to let it go and then at least allow the increased volume in activity to generate some production, and then we can tax. But hey, why are we missing our revenue targets in the midst of increasing taxes? The message to government is simple. People pay taxes when they make profits. So if you are taxing high and not meeting your targets, it means people are not making profits. And people are not making profits because, first, the cost of business is rising. Secondly,
Hello, Dr. Ayamga. Can you hear me? Dr. Ayamga, are you still there? It appears the connectivity this morning is not really helping us. Let me try Dr. Boateng to find out whether the connection will be any better. Same question to you, Eric. What is your take on the bit of taxes? No. I was going to Dr. Boateng.
Oh, okay.
So there are two areas. Thank you. My take on the taxes is this, that I do not expect the finance minister to take off any taxes, because in the mind of the government, although the expenditure is more than revenue, in the mind of the government over the years shows that they rather want to increase revenue to make up the expenditure rather than cutting down the expenditure.
That may be true, but that may be true, Doc. But consider that VAT has increased by those 2.5 percentage points. That inflation is where it is over the last 2 months. It has ticked up again. And that we have those 3 new tax handles in addition to the COVID-19 levy and the e-levy.
I'm thinking that the government introduced the 3 new taxes because they realized that the e-levy was not going to give them the needed revenue. And there should be an alternative way to cushion up the revenue that is expected. We shouldn't forget that the government in the budget has a medium-term target. That is to raise revenue to about 18.3 or so percent. So they are trying to exploit various avenues. I'm not encouraging that it is a good thing to do, but I'm looking into the mind and what the government has been doing over the years. And these taxes affect industries, and it affects it affects industry output. Industry output also influences inflation. Inflation also influences the exchange rate and interest rate. So there is a transmission mechanism, and the government is found himself between the devil and the Red Sea, whether to cut down taxes to increase industry output or to increase taxes to get the needed revenue to fund it. So you will need a holistic view as to the exact thing that government wants to do, because you cannot keep talking about industry being engine of growth and reviving industry and keep levying new taxes. I do not expect the minister to reduce any of the taxes. However, the ideal thing I would have recommended that if we have brought new tax handle, the e-levy should have been scrapped off, so that you will find innovative ways to expand the new taxes that is brought to rake in the revenue that you are missing from the e-levy. But hey, I don't think the minister is going to do that, because they are looking for ways to make more money so that they can keep spending. Don't forget the election year is just ahead, and cutting down your revenue handles or your tax handles is going to affect your ability to meet certain caps that will let you look good for the next election. So they know the ideal thing, but I don't think it's convenient for them to do at this moment.
They know the ideal thing, but you have your own doubts about how sustainable this will be. Dr. Ayamga, I hope you're back now. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Dr. Ayamga? Okay, it appears Dr. Ayamga is still not with us. I'll come to you then, Mr. Amposa. Dr. Ayamga, can you hear me now? Okay, so work on your connection, Dr. Ayamga. When it's better, we'll come to you. Mr. Amponsa Boateng, so on that very point that was made in terms of, since you are the taxman, if you look at our deficit, where it stands, 1.8%, comparatively, that is a 5.6% of domestic tax revenue vis-a-vis our GDP, and our expenditure, which stands at 7.4%. Is this where you expected us to be at this point in the year? Were your expectations that we would be faring better, or do you think we are actually riding this wave?
Thank you. I think that, you see, for you to be able to achieve your revenue target, there must be compliance, okay? And therefore, if you are introducing new taxes, I've always maintained that you need to engage the stakeholders so that they will also make an input. Notwithstanding that they have gone ahead to do so, what is going to happen is that these industries or these taxpayers will not be able to generate the revenue or the profit that you expect that will even enable them to be paying the taxes that are expected. For example, let's take the growth and sustainability levy, which is saying that you pay a percentage of your net profit before tax. So if your business is not doing well, at the end of the day, you're going to post net losses before tax. So what it means is that government is losing out on all of that. The other issue is that, in fact, I expect the COVID levy to go off. It should go off because we are no longer experiencing the effects of the COVID as we used to be in the past. I also expect that the finance minister will reintroduce the toll booths. And this time, I expect all the toll booths in the country to be mechanized. Okay? Because if that is done, you realize that the expected revenue will be 4 or 5 times. The other area that I would want the finance minister to look at is the withholding tax regime. The withholding tax regime, and then the stability clauses that we have in some of the agreements that we have. I also expect government to reduce the import levies for specific goods that may be imported and used as raw materials so that the manufacturing sector will be able to increase its output. And when that happens, you will agree with me that it will lead to an expansion in those businesses. And eventually, when that happens, employment will also increase. So I think that, yes, there's a lot that we can do. Instead of probably introducing these new tax measures, I expected us to look at expanding the tax net. And that is one area that I've always maintained that, yes, the GRA is doing better now with the introduction of the tax identification number, and also that your TIN also merged with the Ghana card. You also have the GRA also now having the high net worth office, where I know that certain persons who lead certain lifestyles have been invited to the GRA, and they're actually making some monies from them. We can also mention the property rate, which in the past it was there, but its implementation wasn't that good. I think so far GRA has done well, and so you can now even go on a portal and put in your details, and then you'll be able to pay. And then one major thing, we lose money.
Very quickly on that, Mr. Amponsa Boateng. I want to go back to Dr. Yamga, but
okay.
So very quickly on that, let me find out, when you said the bit about the high net worth individuals, should we also be looking at politicians? I mean, of course, Cecilia Abnabdapa has come into the fray recently with what was found in her home, but should we also be looking at politically exposed people and maybe ramping it up by way of tax revenue in terms of how much they have, especially if those sums of money have not gone through the tax system?
Yes, yes. Last week, or was it this week that the story broke out? I was
just when it gets interesting. Just when it gets really interesting. So we'll see whether we can connect to Mr. Amponsa Boateng. If not, we'll move on to Mr. Amponsa Boateng. Are you back with us?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So briefly on that point.
Yes. What I'm saying is that the High Net Worth Office has to invite the former minister and also the financial intelligence, because we must be able to know the source of that money. And if you look at our tax laws, even if the money was earned outside and the income is brought into the country, it has tax implications. Finally, is an area that all of us have mentioned, and nothing much has been done, which is corruption. Look, we lose a lot of revenue due to some officials of the GRA condoning and conniving with the taxpayers. And also, even when it comes to procurement system in the country, there is so much corruption and we lose a lot of money. And I believe that the last time that we met, we had a discussion on it, and we're losing about $3 billion a year. And that is the amount that we've run to the IMF to actually take, so that we'll be able to support the budget.
Okay. Let me bring in Dr. Ayamga now. So in case you missed a bit, because you're now joining us on phone, some of the things that Mr. Amponsa Boateng just made mention of, he expects that government will retain its tax, the number of taxes, and he is saying that there should be the reintroduction, which we've spoken of, by the way, of the tolling system on our roads, and he expects them to be mechanized this time around to guarantee efficiency and effectiveness. Then he talks about a reduction in the import levies. What is your take on that? And add to that, Dr. Ayamga, we've heard former Finance Minister Seth Terkper talk about the Treasury bill system and how government seems to be unduly leaning on it as a sort of crutch. It's a short-term, if you like, debt instrument, and of course we're looking at 91 days to a year, but it appears government is leaning more and more towards that. How dangerous is it if government relies inordinately on Treasury bills? Those two quick questions for you.
Yes, Ben, I don't expect government to take off the e-levy, or for that matter, 2.5 VAT. The reason being that these taxes were imposed because government wanted to prove to the IMF that it is doing everything domestically possible to raise its revenues, and for that matter, be able to secure the IMF deal. So much of the taxes we are having is not necessarily the revenue objectives that they have for those taxes, but then to project an image of working to secure domestic revenues and to ensure that at least we are raising some significant revenues on our own. It will not be morally right for you to keep your taxes low and then go asking people to cancel your debts. So what the government was doing, it knew very well that those taxes were going to cripple the economy, was going to dampen domestic production, and was going to also dampen consumer confidence. And once businesses are not making profits, you are not going to get the taxes and the revenues you need. So everybody knew that. But government did it anyway because it wanted to prove to the IMF that it is raising taxes. It has the mandate to increase taxes, and it is doing everything possible to ensure that it restores the country on a sustainable path, but at least increasing our revenue to GDP, and by so doing can continue to secure IMF. you can see that it is already introducing another round of domestic debt exchange program. That is because those taxes are not generating the revenue government needs. And therefore, government has to prove again that it can still do something. There's still some tools left in the gamut to raise domestic revenue. That is something it's going to play because it has to go back to the IMF for the next tranche. And because our first round of debt exchange and our negotiation with our external partners, especially in the markets, are not going well, government has to return and pretend to be doing something in order to get the next tranche. And when it comes to the removal of the e-levy and the introduction of the road toll, it's neither here nor there, because the e-levy was introduced on the back of the removal of road tolls. Government felt that it was going to raise significant revenue to the extent that it didn't need the road tolls. So now that government is thinking about introducing the road tolls again, then we ought to be asking questions whether the e-levy that doesn't have to be scrapped in its entirety, because government wanted to introduce it. That's why it cleared up the road tolls, which was a bad decision anyway, because it is a better tool at mobilizing revenue rather than trying to go through the e-levy. That's what I would say. But as it stands now, we do not seem to have a grip in terms of raising domestic revenue. All our targets are off. If you look at our what you call our revenue projections, we are running a deficit of almost 9%, about 8.9%. So if you take that into consideration, look at our own GDP projection. We wanted to grow at 2.8. We are doing 1.5, and others think that is going to be lower. If you take all these things into consideration, and even now, add the fact that our debt stock just went up by about 20%, then it tells you that...
We're talking of the Bank of Ghana's situation, right?
Yes. So, then...
Dr. Ayamga, go ahead. I was just saying that the 20%, you are referencing the Bank of Ghana, the situation to do with the Bank of Ghana.
Yes. I'm referencing that, and I'm saying that on the back of the IMF deal, we should have seen some signals. First, the cedi should have at least gained, or if for nothing at all, stabilized. Second, we should have seen some significant reduction in our debt stock. Some will say it is because government has now recognized some of its obligations and brought in some debt, but it's still not satisfactory. We should have seen some growth returning, or we've been on the trajectory, at least meeting half of our growth projections. That we are not doing. So if you look at exports, which was one of the key things that government said it was going to do, exports are falling. They try to argue that imports are also falling, but imports have fallen because industries are not importing the raw materials and the inputs to produce. So these symptoms of a collapsing economy, and we ought to have a new approach entirely. You want to ask government, was there a single strategy or a single program that it wanted to at least invest these proceeds from the IMF in? No, it was just the usual take it and shore up our reserves, make sure that we improve our liquidity position. And let me say something. People have lost confidence in the financial system. So, yes, leave the CCL issue. That is a different ballgame together. But people are keeping their monies at home. Because of the domestic debt exchange program, nobody wants to buy bonds. People are even afraid of putting their money in treasury bills. And yes, you are right by saying that government is overly dependent on it and borrowing more or less through the treasury bills. But confidence in the financial system is at a high time low. It's really, really low that people keep money in their homes. People don't invest. People tend to rather buy other things and then keep foreign currency. So when they get cities, they buy dollars and keep it.
Right.
So that is why we keep pumping dollars into the economy, and in a matter of days, everything gets sucked up, and it is not translating in economic growth. It's not translating in productivity. And because of the taxes, rising cost of production, investor confidence is also low. So if you look at everything that's ought to be improving because we have got this IMF deal, they're going down. And the one thing that government could have done, that is by demonstrating commitment, that is cutting the size of government significantly, and then showing leadership in this. Government is not doing it. So, and it is the only flexible part, I can say, in our entire budget, cutting down government spending, reducing the size of government significantly,
right,
and then following up with other sectors. Until we see these things happening, we are not going to witness at least some recovery. And the 2025 that people are even projecting that will start recovery, we may shoot well beyond that, and this country may suffer for a little longer.
Dr. Boateng Adam, let me bring you into the fray, because the rhetoric from Dr. Ayamga does not reflect what Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has been telling us. In fact, he talks about a quick economic rebound. If I may source from the Daily Graphic today, he says he has assured the business community that the economy is bouncing back and has called for its collaboration to make that happen within the shortest possible time. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has been very optimistic. Does that optimism reflect your posture as a watcher of the economic space, especially as Dr. Ayamga says that confidence in the financial sector is at an all-time low? Do you lean more towards the finance minister or more towards what Dr. Ayamga is saying?
I would rather go with Dr. Ayamga, because we look at the history of the finance minister who was confident that we're not going to IMF, and we still went to IMF. So it almost appears like when the finance minister takes left, we should be looking at right, because of the history. Now, and I would also encourage that the finance minister shouldn't promise so much to raise expectations. Because when the finance minister promised, in order to probably show like we are attempting, the country is attempting to achieve something, it brings almost like a reversal of fortune. And there's a more reason why I think that the country has moved from production to taxation, which is contrary to what Dr. Boateng told us some time ago. And giving us a clear picture of the economy, I think will make Ghanaians expect less. But when we raise our hopes of going to do this, we should expect a quick turnaround, a quick stability. I think is very problematic. And in any case, you see, the problem we find ourselves in is like trying to make a salt sea taste like putting sugar in the sea. Although you may be able to achieve your aim, but it will take a longer time, So telling us that this is the reality of the case, we need about 10 years, the next 7 years. We'll even let labor not agitate for increments in pay. We'll let investors and industry know where to put their investment. And like Mr. Eric Amponsa was trying to say earlier, that people should move their investment from treasury bill to fixed deposits. I tend to disagree a little, because whichever way they move their money, these banks don't believe so much in the industry, so they're unlikely to give their money to industry, but rather go back and buy treasury bills and keep rolling over. So the real sector, the connection between the financial sector and the real sector is a bit disjointed, that we do not see a transition that the financial sector is financing activities to promote industry and growth. They gather the money and they go back and dump it into treasury bills, because it almost looks like that is the safest thing to do now, rather than to gamble with your money and put it in an industry that may fall down or that may not be able to yield expected returns. If industry is shrinking by about 3%,
right,
it obviously means that whatever you are putting there, you are losing. And no financial institution or no bank will want to go into that. So the finance minister should relax, should give us a clear picture, and let us know that it will take a very long time, and therefore Ghanaians should exercise patience. And I think that will rather help us not to expect so much from the finance minister and the government. Thank you.
Dr. Boateng Adam, we're wrapping the conversation now. I'll give each one of you about some 2 minutes to express your thoughts. I want to start with you. So the first bit I want all of you to address when you get your turn. We're also looking at this renewed debt exchange. This time we're talking about the cocoa bills. We're also looking at the dollar-denominated bills or bonds. We know what is happening with the treasury bills, and already we've discussed that government cannot rely on them. But with this renewed debt exchange situation, what could be the impact of that? What could it lead to a further crunch in the system? And then finally, when the budget is delivered, what are those crucial matters you want to hear Ken Ofori-Atta address? So I'll start with you again, Dr. Boateng Adam. This will be your final bite. Those 2 areas for each one of you. Doc.
Okay, so I'll start with the last question. What do I expect the finance minister to do? Number one, you shouldn't promise us so much. All right, we can feel it, although we don't have the figures. We can feel that things are not going well. So you should just come and confirm our fears that we should embrace ourselves for the West and that things will not change soon. And in that case, we'll be measured, even in spending the little we have. But if you promise us so much, we'll go shopping and we come back to find out that what we promised cannot be delivered. We have already spent what we accumulated. So the finance minister should be measured in telling us the way forward. And in revising, especially in revising the indicators. And you could see, most often they give us so much hope. Then in the media, they revise it downwards. And it's in the case of the E-levy where they were expecting about 2.24 billion Ghana cedis. And in the first quarter, they were able to do about only 11% of it. So it seems that clearly your revenue handles, you are not going to meet the target for the year. And it's a concern. So you shouldn't promise us so much. Now let's come to the financial sector. In the second wave of debt restructuring, in finance, there's something we call signaling. What happened, what the Minister of Sanitation, Ms. Cecilia Dapar, did, signal to investors that the managers of economy have a certain information that we don't have. That is why, assuming that the money is genuine, that is why the minister is not taking that $1 million and the 300,000 euros to the bank. So if I'm an investor who is not privy to certain sensitive information, I will look at what the minister has done and find an alternative avenue for my money, especially when we could sense that there's a second wave coming of debt restructuring. I will not be so much in hurry to invest in anything relating to government, or I will find some. That is why you could see that a lot of investment is going to the real estate sector. That people are putting money into building, probably because the only investment which is real, and the other one is just a financial arrangement, So investors are watching, and whatever our leaders or those in government are doing is indirectly sending signal to us that we are not out of, the country has not stabilized yet. And therefore, we should be mindful whenever we decide to go to the financial sector. So with the dollar bill that is coming and the cocoa bill, all those that are coming, it also tell us that we are going to borrow more and that we can only defer the interest up to a point. And when we start paying the interest on those debts, we'll be expecting exchange rate to respond to it. And the dollar the cedi will depreciate more. And if these bills go through and they are unable to negotiate a good terms to defer interest payment, I'm estimating that we will go back to 15 Ghana cedis per dollar before the year ends. These are my takes. Thank you.
Right. And that is a place we don't want to be, about $16, 16 cedis to the dollar. That's not a place we want to be. But it's interesting, that bit you said about the signaling. Unwittingly, Cecilia Dapa, by the discovery, may have signaled to the business community, you know what, maybe there's something in there that you are not aware of. But those who walk the corridors of power are aware of. But let me come to you, Mr. Amponsah Boateng, for your final take on those two quick points.
Okay, thank you very much. What I'll say is that the government still will not be able to pay. If you look at the cocoa bills, you also look at the dollar-denominated bonds, and it's because of a simple reason. The revenue that we get will still not be enough. You will agree with me that GRA has exceeded or was able to exceed its revenue target for 2021 and 2022. The problem is that government expenditure is still very, very high. So I expect the finance minister to look at that and then ensure that with the budget review, he cuts down significantly on some of the areas that I think we do not have to spend so much money on. The other issue that he has mentioned is the fact that he expects the economy to bounce back. I do not see it happening in the foreseeable future. And the reasons are simple. Inflation is still high. The cost of doing business is still high. And so at the end of the day, whatever that industry or whatever that the businessman would want to invest in, I do not think he or she will do so. And so I expect him in the mid-year review budget to come up with investor-friendly policies that will rather attract investment into the country, and also look at the loopholes or the leakages in the revenue mobilization drive. Because if you look at how much revenue that we lose in a year, that is huge. And so I expect him to look at that. As for the depreciation of the cedi, looking at the trend, I can assure you that we might end the year with an exchange rate of $1 to 15 Ghana cedis, or probably 16 Ghana cedis. And I don't think that will augur well for us. I expect us rather to consume what we produce. We must change our lifestyle.
All right.
For breakfast, why should we be looking at the old, the foreign ones? Why don't
Mr. Amponsah Boateng, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I think the thrust of your message has been made known. So we have Dr. Boakye Adam projecting 16 cedis to the dollar by close of year if we don't get our act together. That would be crazy. We have Mr. Amponsah Boateng also predicting 15 or 16 to the dollar. Dr. Ayamga, in less than a minute, please, your final take. We have to wrap.
My final take is the government ought to turn to the basics. We diversify economy from agriculture. When things go bad, you go back to the basics. That is, we grow back to agriculture by investing in food production. If we cut food budget, even in the small households, they make savings and they invest. So we really have to regrow the economy from inside out. This idea of trying to stimulate industry and other things when agriculture is suffering, we are not going to succeed in that. So I expect the finance minister to target growth in the agricultural sector in his budget review, target debt reduction, not just merely pushing and appearing to fight debt treatment. It should target debt reduction. Government should stop borrowing, especially through the treasury bills and live within the means. And then I also think that government seriously cut the size of its government. On the CCDAPA issue, it is telling everybody that don't put your money in the bank. $1 million, if you are talking $100 bills, is just 10 bundles. By the time somebody picks money out of 10 bundles and you don't know, it means that there's a huge stash of cash in that house. So
thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ayamga. So I think that signaling was already mentioned by Dr. Eric Boakye-Adom, but thank you for reinforcing that point. Our guests this morning who have joined us for this conversation, Dr. Eric Boakye-Adom, Senior Lecturer, Faculty of Accounting and Finance at the University of Professional Studies, Accra. We also had Dr. Michael Ayamga. You just heard him. He's an economist at the UDS, together with Eric Amponsa Boateng, economist and tax consultant. What are your expectations ahead of the budgetary statement, the mid-year budget review? Well, you can shoot your comments to us on social media. And just stay with us. We have more coming your way on the AM Show.